Go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LJL Officially Unofficial Podcast, episode 3 of season 2, episode 35 overall. Of course, I am one of your 3 co-hosts, Alex, otherwise known as by MaskedSwan on the internet. The man directly to my left, Initia1ise. He is the supreme man when it comes to play-by-play.
Play-by-play. I could do color too. I could be the supreme color commentator. I just don't want to make Alex look bad.
That's the one. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Or myself. Both Alexes, I guess, technically, in this one.
True enough, actually. Yes, fair point.
And the man completely over on the other side for me, the meritorious man himself, Nymaera. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going? Yes, I guess Sam could put me to shit. I'll just have to brush up my play-by-play. That's the only response I've got.
But you had previously done some play-by-play in Spring Split, I thought, or summer.
Actually,
we did do a bit of those.
Funny story. I was just so I hopped onto Milky, who guested for us this week onto his stream. He was doing some Korean challenger stuff today, and I played a team fight or two. So I'm the possibilities are truly endless.
We'll have to roll swap for a game or two somewhere. Find out. Make it like a channel point reward or something.
I'm always host. That's fine. Don't worry. Don't let me lose my one thing, gentlemen. We're getting sidetracked already. Nymaera, what exactly is this podcast? I mentioned LJL. We've said a few things. What are we talking about? Casting, huh?
Well, how could we get sidetracked from what we do, what we live for, what our passions are, and that is in this format, Japanese League of Legends, which is the LJL, the League of Legends Japanese League. We cover everything we can do about this region in League of Legends and everything that goes on there. And this is the podcast, which kind of like the shoulder content for our main broadcast of all the live games in English.
Really is. And Initia1ise, if we're so wrapped into the world of the LJL, do we have any affiliation with Riot Games and their partners?
Alas, no. No, we don't. They have not got in contact with us yet. We're doing this all off our own back, all by our lonesome. But if Riot want to get in touch with us, we would love to talk. So hit those DMs. You know you want to.
And with that, obviously, this podcast is our own views and opinions and does not represent the LJL, the LJLOU, our official broadcast, or unofficial broadcast, rather, and anything else. This is just 3 guys just spitballing and saying some stuff around the LJL. You can also check out our social medias right directly below each of our faces, at MaskedSwan for myself, at Initia1ise with a 1 in the middle instead of the L, and at Nymaera over on the other side. You can also find the LJLOU officially unofficial Twitch channel, Discord, and everything else that we have. Links in the description down below or in the show notes, as well as a quick search on any of those sites. You should be able to find us. You can also find this podcast on all major audio streaming platforms. Let us know, and it should be there already. Gentlemen, the main topic of this week is we're already 1 week down, coming in to the 2021 spring split. 8 games we have already covered. If you're interested in finding those, you can find those VODs over on our YouTube or Twitch channel, respectively. And gentlemen, there's a lot to unpack here, moving through the table very quickly of the matches that did happen. We've got V3 Esports facing off against DFM. DFM were victorious. We've got Rascal Jesters versus DFM. DFM were victorious there. Sengoku facing off against Rascal Jesters. Rascal Jesters upset.
Good.
Moving very quickly, V3 onto overthrew Sengoku, which maybe if you listen to the last episode podcast, we kind of all thought could happen. Burning Core versus the Hawks. The Hawks were victorious there, but then Burning Core struck back against Crest Gaming Act. Crest Gaming Act then overthrew AXIZ, but then AXIZ upset again, potentially maybe overthrew the Hawks. Gentlemen, there is so many games. 8 games for us to kind of give our thoughts about, as well as the teams. What's some of your takeaways from this first week?
Ooh,
let's start with DFM. Let's start with DFM at the very top there. It makes sense.
So they look pretty good, honestly. Like the strong laning stats coming out of them, and their late game decision making is still actually quite strong. That said, we've definitely seen teams take it to them. Both the matches they played this week, V3, who we kind of tout as probably the second best team, and Rascal Jesters, perhaps a bit more surprisingly, were both throwing some of their own punches, some of which landed. And it wasn't necessarily like that DFM were playing poorly per se, but when DFM would make a play on one side of the map, the other teams would be making plays on the other. There would be DFM teleporting, getting kills, and someone else turning up and cleaning up some ending of those. I'm thinking of the Zoe from
Recap.
Gosh, Rascal, Recap, who had some great plays to clean up some kills at the end of fights. So yeah, I think they look strong. Aria playing 2 new champions for himself in Oriana and TF, who are big in the current meta, big for a lot of mid laners, but first for him, looked strong on those. Ebby got a little bit out of sorts on his Gnar, but still did some interesting stuff. So yeah, I think overall, first weekend with a coach for a support, not bad stuff.
So Sam pretty much covered everything that I would go towards at first. I think it is important to note that, of course, Aria's always played new stuff, but really hadn't played or really prized a lot of those control magey kind of things. The TF was banned against him a lot in summer. Of course, he never ended up. It was just banned against CJ like 50% of their games. So yeah, DFM retaining a lot of what we knew their old lineup in terms of the Seros and Gang in the roster and the strengths that they had, but also potentially bringing some new strengths to it. I guess the one thing which I'd be like, ooh, okay, in that Rascal Jester part when Sam was saying, oh, they really took it to them, that includes a solo kill onto Aria and a solo kill onto Utapon by their opposing members. That's the one thing I was like, oh wait, that just doesn't
kills too.
That just doesn't happen.
No.
Like, I wouldn't even necessarily, I think the Aria one was probably a little bit more, oh dear, that was a bit silly. I think both of them were actually very well played by the but exactly.
I'm not taking it away from them. I think that
absolutely.
actually Rascal Jester has very much earned those kills.
Massively true. And the soul kill in particular for me, where with the Kai'Sa onto the Jhin with just full 100-0 from the other end of the lane, utterly gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, Detonation Focus Me, we had high expectations of them coming into this, but are they actually meeting it for either of you at the moment? Are they anywhere near as dominant as we thought they were? For me, no. I was expecting a far more dominant performance, similar to what we saw from the very beginning of spring 2020, where they just came out the gates and it looked like they couldn't be stopped. They might go on as long as a streak, but I wonder what's the quality of that streak.
We knew spring was going to be a bit of building. Kazu coming in, he looked fine. Not gang special, because only gang is gang special, really. But no, it's not like DFM being like super dominant. I don't know whether I expected them to be spring 2020 dominant because of this whole Kazu thing, and also Aria trying to adapt to a new lineup. I thought that there was a chance that it could collapse. It's not that bad. I think that their individual play did show through in their carries, and I think that they will need to learn a bit about their early and mid games, though.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair, because you're right, Lexi. It wasn't perfect. Like there was some serious like the raw mechanics you saw were still there, right? Like Utapon still really good. Aria, some of the shockwaves were just nasty. Steel, 2 great games, one on the Olaf, one on the Lilia. Ebby, possibly a touch more suspect, but he was also trying to be the primary engager alongside Kazu, who would sometimes go in a little bit out of sync with people. And I think that's kind of what we need to see a little bit more of, is when they're looking to force the issue in the early and mid games, particularly around objectives, being a little bit more cohesive, a bit more decisive, because sometimes they're going in and getting picked off. But them's the breaks right now, with some of the teams actually being a little bit better perhaps than we expected. Like V3 we thought might put up a fight, let's be real. But Jesters, honestly, no credit to them, looked pretty good in their game too. But yes, there are still weaknesses, I think, in DFM, which they'll want to look at, even if they still won their games relatively well.
Exactly. I think let's actually do the opposite side of this axis, not covering axis, but the other team that had a 2 in their record. Sadly, it's on the opposite side. And it was the team where, honestly, I am so proud of the 3 of us, because we were like, actually, no, we're not into the hype of this team. We're like, you, Nymaera, were like, if it happens, it will be like this. Sengoku Gaming, ladies and gentlemen, we predicted them to be a kind of mid-table team. A lot of analysts out there thought they were going to be a top team. They've got some work, and they need to go back to the workshop and kind of think things through, because the playstyle here for them, a quick hint, abysmal. This was just so uncoordinated in so many ways, and I want to go to Nymaera first for this one, because their V3 game especially was just all over the place. It was a mess, and you casted this game with Milky, so I mean, that's why I've got to go to you first.
So I will. Sengoku are not devoid of hope. But the fact that I'm starting with that statement is pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Ramune came in and looked
Fine.
unimpactful. Wasn't
Yeah.
crushed in laning phase, but I mean, this particularly the V3 game. He picked up Illusion versus AXIZ Jace, and AXIZ Jace completely just like overwhelmed in terms of like the map play, because that's the kind of matchup where you can start building around Jace and stuff like that. I think they were largely just beaten to the punch by better macro teams. I think from the teams that we have seen, Rascal Jester and V3 came in looking the hottest around the map. And we saw, and again, we'll talk about them in regards to their own matches recently, but when you've got Rascal Jester, like we said, taking it to DFM, I guess Sengoku, we'd not really thought they would be on the level of DFM anyway, so sure, I guess that wasn't as embarrassing as it could be. I think the main thing is that when we look at the teams they played, it's not like their enemies played badly and they played worse. The other teams played well and they didn't beat them. But this is a team filled with some quite promising individuals, and they just didn't really add up.
Remember, coming into this one, NT had never not been top 3 in an LJL split. He had always made playoffs in the old system, and then obviously in moving through into the new system of 2020, he still always made top 3, top 2 even, made top 3 and top 2. This has got Paz on it, went to Worlds with V3. This has got Ramune. Previously had always gone to international events, only missed it twice. Once when he was a part of DFM when he didn't get to play, and once when he was on the Hawks, and just, well, Hawks were the Hawks before he decided to drop out of the Hawks after spring. This has got Gango, who has been known to be one of the better, more aggressive AD carries, and Crash, who we have huge expectations on. And then, apparently, the bot lane that I wasn't rating very highly for Rascal Jester's Initialize, I'm wrong. I'm actually wrong, and I'll admit it. Go for it with the Rascal Jester.
Yeah, so I think, you know, clearing up the thoughts on Sengoku, like, some good players on that squad that just don't have the cohesion yet. And there's, you know, they're very obviously getting pulled apart in mid and late game decision making. Go check out the ending to the V3 game in particular, where V3 backdoor them basically while there's plays going around elsewhere around the map. It's a bit sad.
The 23-minute mark is where it all changes, because that's where, if you look at the match history, they're only like 1.5k ahead, and then it's just a roller coaster. It just like dips, and it's just like, oh god, V3 have just pulled the pedal, and they've hit their power spike, so it makes sense.
Yeah, and there's just some face into wall moments there. For the Jesters, though, oh my days, I am so happy to see this team is competitive. The first game against DFM, they basically, Arya and Steel look for a gank in mid lane. Flash, they can't get the kill. And Hachimecha skirts vision literally 10 seconds after, watches where Steel goes, hangs around at the bush, and then they return the favor onto this flashless TF running in the mid lane and get recap on this Zoe First Blood effectively. And it's brilliant. And then obviously Steel goes top and they get a return up there and various things happen. But what you basically saw was you've got a returning veteran who hasn't played in a while in recap in the mid lane, who is, you know, we've got a lot of questions about, like, he's just not played a lot. And you've got Kinatu in the top lane, who is a scouting ground rookie. Then you've got 3 really big veterans. Hachimecha has been around the LJL a long time. His early game pathing has actually been really smart. The couple games he's played, he did really smart stuff against DFM. It wasn't enough, don't get me wrong, but it was smart stuff. And then the bot lane are nutters. Actually crazy. They just go in all the time, and it's not always perfect. It doesn't always work out. Secret taking 2 tower shots at level 2, having taken a Zenith Blade onto an Alistair. Not exactly perfect. But then on the other side, you've also got this guy, Sol, who has been diamond in the rough on so many teams for so long, since 2015. He's been on Kongdu, he's been on HLE, I think it was. Or was it Sonic Boom? I need to go to quickly double check. He's been around that low.
Well,
yeah, Spanning. Yeah, Freaker. It's Freaker, of course.
No, Sam, that was Secret that's on Spanning.
I was, sorry, thank you. That's the way around it was. And he's always been in this really frustrating place of, I am good, but the rest of my team isn't quite there. And both games, honestly, we've seen from him, he's been really impressive. His Kai'Sa versus DFM was very scary. We talked about the solo kill onto Utapon's Jhin. It was really stylish. He lands a Void Seeker. He goes in with the ult. He hits all the abilities. He gets all the autos, gets that 100 to 0. He knows his damage numbers really highly, and he's willing to pull the trigger. Sometimes that's hurt them because they have gone in a little deep and found teleports and stuff coming their way. On the other hand, though, it is great to see you've got veterans with talent willing to look for fights and look for plays. And that was part of the problem in their Jesters last year, is they looked a little bit aimless in the mid game, and they didn't have anybody who was willing to say, yeah, I'll carry, I'll make the plays. And they've got Kinatu, who I still think have some issues with. I think we're going to need to see a little bit more out of him yet. Particularly in that first game, looked a little outclassed. But Hachimecha, strong. Recap, you're lane against Ari and you come up with scorelines like that, you can't complain. And on the bot lane, I'm just really pleasantly surprised by it. I think they're really aggressive and should be really fun to watch.
So this does mean that at the moment we've got DFM going 2-0, Sengoku Gaming going 0-2, and Rascal Jesters surprisingly going 1-1. Now the other team in that top four, in that first 4 games rather, is V3 Esports. And gentlemen, let's just conclude the top half of this table and matches. The mid part of this table. V3 Esports. What's our initial thoughts? Personally, for me, they're actually meeting and matching my expectations. I thought the game against DFM would be competitive, and it was. It was a competitive game. It was also, by the way, a damn fun game to cast over.
Yeah,
and the V3 Sengoku game was honestly really solid.
Really good.
It definitely showed, as we've already slightly hinted towards a lot with when looking at the Sengoku side. It got to a point, and then V3 just like hit this like click. There was a switch, and they just understood. And Cog already being able to play Gragas makes me very happy. Very happy.
Yeah, so I cast that the second V3 game. Of course, I didn't get to do. I wasn't around for the first one. I was on production on that one, but the second one, Mugen really impressed me. Like really impressed me. Because we saw CGA, and we'll talk around them later, try and have their own unique approach to, well, how do you deal with something like Renekton and Talia? What's up with that? Because you know that's going to be a top lane duo. And V3 didn't necessarily do anything interesting in the draft to do too much with that. But Mugen's pathing effectively nullified it all the same. Because we said we had the Gragas in top lane, but effectively every time that Sengoku were trying to look towards top lane, do anything early in that game, Mugen was there. And suddenly a 3v2 is not something you want to dive. You don't want to dive that, particularly when he was playing the Nidalee, I think it was. I think it was the Gragas Nidalee versus the Renekton Talia. So I think that my main takeaway from V3 is that Reiner and Mugen still very on point. Cog adds a bit more playmaking, a bit more diversity to the top lane. Ace came in looking pretty hot.
Ace feels more comfortable.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
I'll say his first game on the Renekton wasn't fantastic, but it also wasn't easy for him to be fantastic. You know, he went like 0-4-7, was very much a met factor in that game at best. But that was also because they put the Renekton in mid because they wanted to give Cog the preferable matchup in that one. And Cog in that first game, with that the Cog's Jace in the first game was a wonder. It was really good stuff. Like a lot of fights.
The fact that Jace is going to be a flex pick is so funny to me.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I mean, I know that V3 last year, along with some other LJL teams, was scrimming Gum right from the VCS, and Gum were a team that always played Jace mid. They had it in top lane too, because they had Kiaya in top lane, of course. But DO1 in the mid lane played this Jace, and they played the Jace Nidalee as kind of like this 0 CC but super heavy poke combo, and they just do absolute wonders with it. So V3 have definitely picked up that to an extent again, because they did play it last year, but then of course having Cog with the Jason top side now gives them that flexibility to get preferential matchups across the board. And it didn't work out versus DFM. We talked about that.
No,
but
I mean, so versus DFM, like Cog, like considering he got very far ahead with the Jace lead, they couldn't really make enough out of it because DFM were better in the team fights. That said, Jace, for all that he's not a team fight champion, if he gets far enough ahead and he's building lethality, anyway, he can just hammer form jump on you with the skies and detonate you. And he did that a couple times where he just gets to flash Q onto someone and blows them up, or gets to hit a three-man Howard shock blast. And like that kind of thing where you go, okay, there's definitely something here. It wasn't enough, but it kept things a lot more even than perhaps it should have been. So I was quite excited by what I saw out of Cog. I think Ace's second game, when he had the Jace, was also actually pretty good. Yeah. Hollow as well. Little bit of room to keep going. I think he started well versus DFM, but mid game
I think Hollow was fine.
Mid game he got caught out a few times in a row. He went from 4-1 to 5-5 in very consecutive team fights.
But we
which
also
was-
saw that because that was the Zaya game, right? Was that the Zaya game?
Yeah, that was the Zaya game.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
like
no,
obviously
we
it
saw
wasn't
that
easy,
but like as Sam's already mentioned, spot.
yeah. Sorry, I think we lost you for half a sec there. What were you saying, mate?
I was just going to back you up with saying like this was a game where V3 were just always going to be if they upset DFM, it was always going to be an upset. There was no
that's true.
reason to
Yeah.
think otherwise. And V3 then showed why they are the superior team against Sengoku Gaming, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Now I don't want to dwell too much, so if you've got any quick closing thoughts on these 4 teams, say them now or have your piece till a little bit later.
I think are pretty good. I'm happy for Cog particularly, who I think was better than I actually pegged him for in some ways. Actually, like the Jace game
Yeah, I
in
had a lot of
particular,
hope for them.
actually gave me like, oh, you're really good. Okay, want to see. I'm looking forward to seeing a bit more out of him on V3.
Okie dokie, okie dokie. And gentlemen, now we must go over to the other 4 teams. The teams that went 1-1, and these are the teams which honestly are making my predictions moving forward far more difficult, because how they won sometimes was like, oh, that looked really good, or sometimes it was like, oh god. Okay, so we are working with a little bit more limited information here because of an hour-long podcast we decided to have in between one of these games due to a pause. Thank you, Initia1ise and Nymaera, for dealing with that one, because that game of Burning Core facing off against the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks, which the Hawks were victorious, as I've already mentioned in, was an absolute mess. It had to get remade because of a bug, and then a DC
Chrono
that
breaks,
happened.
baby.
Everything else. Outside of that, these games were very different in and of themselves. Let's go to Crest Gaming Act, the first team to cover here, because I think Crest Gaming Act showed definitely the duopoly of how this team is going to play. They're either going to fight you for everything, like they did against AXIZ, which was an interesting game to say the least, or they're on the other side and they're just getting stomped by Burning Core. And it's a really hard team, honestly, for me to appreciate. So I want to go over to you, Initia1ise, first. What's your thoughts on Crest Gaming Act?
Oh man. So I think there is hope for this squad yet. I think Cassin in particular looks pretty good, actually, honestly, and Nation as well is pretty smart. They are actually making decent proactive plays, I think is the way I want to phrase it. It hasn't always worked out. I think in particular their game, let me just have a quick look at which one this one would have been I'm thinking of here. Their game versus...
Do you want the Zinzao or the Nidalee?
I think it'll have been the Zinzao, probably.
That's
So
the
the
Zinzao, that was against Burning Core.
Yeah, that one was a little bit rougher because the Zinzao didn't get off as much as he would have liked. But even then, there were some decent plays that were made. Cassin did get to a point where he was relatively scary, but I think in the end, people like Once and Gariado and Yuhi actually on the Aphelios kind of overcame where that gap was. Then versus AXIZ, where things weren't looking good. Well, they got quite a way ahead, and then things started looking a bit dicey around a Baron loss.
It was well and truly a roller coaster.
Oh, that game was a mess. But, actually some late game team fight decision making and keeping a cool with some of the veterans on the squad turned it around. I think they might struggle a little bit, but I think there will always be hope for this squad, and they have at least got enough veteranship and problem-solving ability, actually, is I think what they managed to show. Some decent problem-solving in difficult situations to get out, like Nation's Lucian, for example, versus AXIZ when things were looking quite dicey. Hell, the opposing Samira ended 10-5 and 12. The ability to find ways back into games that perhaps they shouldn't have been in was quite impressive.
I think I'd agree. Nymaera, the bot lane of Crest Gaming Act, though, is,
Yes, that's where we were always going to end up at, really. When we were talking, there's a reason this team went 1-1, and there's a reason why, heck, their victory was like very hard fought.
Yes.
We had some worries about Milan coming in, about what's going to happen when we've got an untested Scouting Downs player coming into a big league. Milan, of course, you watched them in Scouting Grounds and had some pretty positive things to say about the player.
I did.
They positioned pretty poorly, laned relatively poorly, and they kind of failed to really leverage their power across the map. So the first game was the one with Cassian playing Jinzhou and the like. Milan was playing the Misfortune and probably used about 5 out of 7 ults total, clearing waves defensively. One of them was under a mid lane in a turret. Well, they end up walking forwards and end up like taking a step too far forwards, and Gadearu's Orianna just like shockwaves and one-shots them. It felt like Milan just was quite uncomfortable in how they were positioning. You know what it kind of reminded me of? A little bit of Honey and Spring on the Hawks, when that team was kind of not communicating effectively, and Honey was kind of the anti-beneficiary of that, or whatever the word is. And in the second game, played an Ashe game, went for a really strange build, going Blade into Hurricane, and then picking up a Mythic third item, which was...
I remember flaming him on broadcast for that.
Weird.
And they
There's
did
no
some
reason
decent
for
damage,
that, right,
but
Nymaera? There's no reason for that, right? Realistically.
I don't see why you would ever do that, really. Okay, so you're against 3 HP stackers, so Blade is
good
pretty okay, but even then...
Hurricane for wave clear if you're behind, I guess, but even that doesn't feel good.
No.
So, yeah, you're against 3 HP stackers, and sure, I guess Hurricane second on Ashe is kind of what you need either way, I guess, but because it's less good on ranged than it is on melee, it feels very meh. I've never seen a pro do that build. I don't suspect we will again. Kraken Slayer is a really good item first. Don't think that you need... Or Shield Bow is a really good item first. Gives you that lifesteal too. Just kind of strange. Anyway, so Milan ended up winning that second game versus AXIZ, but it wasn't really due to them. They had some okay moments, but yeah.
And something of note for this, AXIZ did happen to ban his Jhin, which was his most played champion in Scouting Grounds. Burning Core didn't ban it, and it was open, but let's be real, once Burning Core had already picked the Aphelios, you can't really pick a Jhin into Aphelios if you don't have a supporting champion, especially with Thresh already getting picked up for the Aphelios.
Jhin Maokai. Jhin Maokai's about it.
Yeah. Maybe
but
something like
against the Thresh,
Leona,
really
I guess
want that?
you really want to go in hard.
So you don't... Okay, so like...
It's weird, right?
It's weird. So you can pick Gragas, which is okay, Gragas support, but like
that'd be fine.
that kind of Gragas support is tanky enough and tends to like just live through any lane nowadays. But Jhin Maokai on patch 10.11, 11.
Oh, that's true. It's
rather.
10.1. It's not 2.
You can still do like the double traps, have the just hold them at arm's length and poke them out for like half the HP if they ever run into a trap. That's kind of about it. But yeah,
I mean, like the
Aphelios Thresh is a really strong lane. Don't like jungle with that.
So I mean, what would something be like the sort of the Jhin Leona, like the all-in CC lane? Would that just be going too far?
Wait, versus who?
Aphelios Thresh.
You're just losing.
I mean, you just. What is? Would you just go too deep with the Leona and just get stuck there? Would be my.
Well,
fear.
I mean, it's the problem of Aphelios always wants people to run into you, and that's exactly what Leona's doing. And also like,
if he has white and red, you're dead.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty much.
That's
even if you've got something like Gravitum and you
Gravitum
people
or
in place,
Infernum,
stuff like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Because like there's a lot of different ways that you can play around
Sure.
it, but
I mean,
it feels like Aphelios versus most engaged supports right now is really thriving.
Really good.
actually.
Which
So
is
that's why it's gonna
considering
come
there's
back.
so many engagements. Hell, Jhin Leona is a popular lane in partly, but at the minute, and that sounds like it's a bad idea there.
So, I mean, coming back to Crest Gaming Act, gentlemen, in that second game, Nymaera, the bot lane we're starting to identify is going to be the common problem for Crest Gaming Act. Do we think it's solvable? I mean, it's far too early to really know, but what do you think?
See, Alchemy didn't exactly have a great 2 games either.
No. Didn't.
What did I...
And I know, right? I know. There's definitely something about that. And I think that Alchemy has been paired with was paired with Gango last year, who at least when he popped off was really strong, right?
Strong, very lane-focused player.
For sure. So I think that some of the set engages were pretty okay in the first game, but it's hard to tell like what they can actually change because there were a lot of things going wrong. Their 2v2 senses were kind of meh. Their positioning was kind of awkward, and then because you're losing so much prior from just losing 2v2s, which maybe you should be doing better in, you lose vision, and that kind of snowballs the game from there. So I don't know. It kind of feels like their bot lane was just not in the right headspace this week.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'll give credit to the top side of the map, though. I think Naps for Nectar in that second game in particular was got some juicy full engages onto people like Honey when you needed to. And, and Cassin and Nathan put up the most damage in the game on that late game Lucian as well. Navori Quick Blades running rampant. There is some hope in that top. For at least for making some good proactive plays and being having a decent mid jungle synergy by the looks of it. Nathan and Cassin seem to be playing pretty nicely together.
I think that's a fair assessment. There's definitely the opportunity, but Nahyun isn't an amateur. He's coming in. They're both Korean players, so that's also you can just offhandedly, if Japanese falls out the brain, you can default to your jungler immediately in Korean, which communication is going to be a huge part. I think that's going to be really important. Gentlemen, if you don't mind, I want to just pivot now over to a team that actually caused Crest Gaming Act a huge bunch of problems, and that's going to be our all-favorite Narwhals, AXIZ. Coming into this, we had a lot of questions. They picked up a rookie mid laner from LJL of Megumin, and this team went 1-1. They lost the Crest Gaming Act in a very tense game before it went in Crest Gaming Act's favor. But, I mean, AXIZ, I'm not going to talk too much about the Jin. No, not the Z, because that's for later. That's for later. Yes. I've got a bunch of information to drop on for both of you as well as for our listeners.
I'm a Z player too, so yeah, I can give you some hot tips on that one if you want.
But what do we think about AXIZ, and what do we think about this lineup?
Oh, I'm so glad they look more competitive than we feared. Like they actually came in. That Crest Gaming Act game. Hell, Hoglet went 9-2-14 on the Olaf and looked really aggressive. As well. Did all right. I mean, struggled a bit in terms of the late game. Definitely fell down a bit in CS, but was pretty okay. Megumin, honestly, not bad, actually. Particularly that, not bad, especially for a rookie. And then Honey, oh my days, this guy has really come into his own, and like a little bit like Sol. If last year he was a bit more reserved, this year this guy is so willing to pull the trigger. It helps he's on Nymaera. It helps he's on Kai'Sa, who are all about kind of those stylish dives. But at the same time, in the loss he posted a 10-5 and 12 scoreline and did dumb damage. And then in the win he was on a Kai'Sa again, going 4-1 and 9 and looking pretty good as well.
I always knew that this was a talented player. I hyped them up coming in because I had done my scouting. I gone, this guy's really good, guys. Trust me, listen to me. He's really good. It's taken a year for it to come, but now I'm like, the seeds I sowed, I was just a year off. Now they're coming to fruition. And Nymaera, AXIZ look like, as Initia1ise already said, they're better than we thought, right?
Absolutely. AXIZ last year they went 0-6 and 0-8 in terms of streaks at the very start of the split. So already they've bettered their entirety of the first half of the splits from both of these the 2020 splits. For me, one of the player which is the litmus test for AXIZ has always been Hoglet. And Hoglet is now the only remaining member of this team, so it's very easy to tell I guess whether they're happy with their situation or not. And Hoglet kind of popped off both games, right?
Yeah, he did.
I think Honey in spring compared to summer on the Hawks lineup too of last year was night and day, and both these players have kind of hit their upswings at the right time for this AXIZ lineup, or so it seems. And honestly, they looked pretty comfortable. I mean, they're playing I guess kind of similar champions in regards, like both kind of like in terms of Olaf and Talir both been quite farming, pathing dependent junglers rather than being overly gank heavy. Then you've got Honey on two diving champions in the Nymaera and the Kai'Sa. But yeah, AXIZ looks like they've kind of found themselves an atmosphere and a team which is on the same page, and that's working for them. So I'm pretty happy for this team. Can't wait to see if they keep it up for a couple of weeks.
Before we go on to what I know MaskedSwan really wants to talk about, I do want to give a brief shout out to Inno in that second game, particularly where he picked up the Gragas, and some of the team fights he pulled on that champion, where he picked up a triple kill in particular, murdered Dasher, got on top of Zenit, did a load of amazing stuff. It was like, this guy's coming in as a rookie and then having team fights like that in his first day. That's good stuff. Some work probably needs to be done a little bit around some of the laning and some of the weak side play, but you're starting to see like there are some tendencies in there which are definitely looking favorable for the guys. So that Gragas game was real nice.
So a quick fun fact about Inno that I recently learnt when I was scouring op.gg and Leaguepedia and everything else. The first team that Inno was a part of was back in 2017, which was Fukuoka Esports, right? Okay. This was set up by, and you're going to know this name, Toki. The French, this is the coach now for Fnatic. He is known as the stats man within the League of Legends world. He helped set up all of the stuff for the off-season playing games over in NA.
in-houses, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, he set up
Yeah,
all
'cause
of the
he used
coding
same
stuff.
bot, he used the same
Discord.
bot in EU, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a hell of a connection. Wow,
So
okay, cross-world.
he founded that team that that Inon was a part of. They sadly didn't qualify in 2017 summer or 2018, so the team got disbanded. But that's actually a fun fact, and it's taken him this long to actually debut. But he's been playing since April 2017 on teams to debut in the LJL. It's taken them this long, and honestly, I actually think it's kind of showing because while he, in a way, we can argue this is a team of 3 rookies and 2 players that at least have had a split on the LJL with Hoglet and Honey, right? Everyone here feels pretty comfortable. I'm not going to go into the thing because it's for later. I'm sorry, Sam. It's a bit for later. But I'm actually surprisingly impressed with the AXIZ lineup. However, pivoting onto a lineup that isn't full of amateurs and it's actually completely full of veterans. Gentlemen, we need to talk about the Hawks. Because the Hawks, I was a lot higher coming in after this week, before this week, and after this, I'm a lot lower on them. So who wants to take the Hawks first?
Man.
Go on then, Initia1ise. You muttered the first word, so you must go first.
Yeah. So I like. Interestingly, the match history for their win over Burning Core isn't actually available. So
no, because of the chrono break.
Because of course it's got chrono break, but that game was. They won, I believe, but it wasn't clean. And Burning Core, you know, like likes of Once and stuff was still relatively scary in that. And then in their loss to AXIZ, that was a rough one. I mean, like, there'll be a little bit of
There's not much to say about this team.
Yeah,
honestly.
I mean, Dasher honestly looked pretty good in both of them, and Zenit.
Dash's Victor was really, really good.
And Dash's Victor was good in his, and honestly his Yone as well. A couple of those double kills were really nice. And Zenit as well actually had a couple really good games as well. Particularly his first game actually versus Burning Core. He took that game into his own hands, actually, a lot of that, and really put his name up. He's another one of those Korean veterans coming over. He's ex-KT and stuff, and definitely looked pretty good. Appamen was a little bit more concerning. Tussle as well, a little bit more concerning. His first game was better. His second game, 0, 5, and 6 on the Lilia, not as good. I think they had an okay week, and they've definitely got some carry strength from their mid and bot, but there are some issues on this team still.
For sure. I think particularly Tussle actually kind of suffered. Tussle, he struggled, right? He was playing stuff like the Lilia. It was in playable games, playable matchups, and some of the team fights were just a bit off, right? It was stuff like not appropriately using Zhonya's, not really finding the best place to ult. And when we saw a couple of games from some of the Lilias this week, I can't remember the exact games, but it felt like that was the odd one out. And Tussle's a player which we've been pretty high on for a while, right?
This was a player that we came in and were expecting very high things because they had previously shown us high things, and we had all just assumed that the Hawks roster that we had seen in spring and summer, that they were just improving over time. They just need to work it out, and we just thought this was the next evolution of them figuring out the pieces, right?
I think that's yes, to an extent, right? Because it feels like they've just been like, okay, right, Dash is our boy, get Tussle in there too, and we'll see what we can build around that. And honestly, I think Zenit was fine actually.
Yeah, he was really that first game really good.
But I think this is like this is the one team I kind of sit there and I'm like, I'm not really convinced I know much about you yet. Because the other teams, it felt like they kind of showed their hand a bit more. As the Hawks, it didn't feel they were firing on all cylinders one game. The next game it was kind of a bit up in the air. I think particularly Corporal I expected a bit more out of, but obviously had a bit of a rough first week. They had a 2v2 death or two.
Well, even in the first game where they did win, it took them 44 minutes to do so. That's not okay. You basically said to the God, I just actually found the game. Burning Core. You basically said to Burning Core, hey guys, scale into to the point that we're at as well. Just you can do that. And the gold lead was only 5k at the end, really.
Ironically,
which doesn't matter.
Ironically, the reason that game was hard is because Yuhi had a really good game on Zaya, and Yuhi is not a guy we normally say, oh wow, they had a good game, because Yuhi, we've had some issues with as a cast, as a broadcast, whatever. But honestly, that game in that one was actually pretty good.
It was decent, yeah.
But on the other side, it's also like, hang on, actually, Zenit maybe could have dove onto them in a couple of team fights earlier because your Kaiser is absolutely popping off.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely assassinated Yuhi a few times in that late game.
It took a while for them to realize they could, is my problem, because I was there, like, you're definitely ahead. And then it's to the point where Yuhi's like almost one-shotting Dasher, and Dasher didn't die that game. But anyway,
neither did Zenit. In fairness, that game felt pretty decent for the Hawks. They were just struggling to close it out, partly because Yuhi was quite strong, partly because Gary Aru, at least off the stats I've got here, went 12-4-3 on the Orianna as well, which is pretty nuts. There were some moments we went, okay, Burning Core, we expected to also be quite good and put up a decent fight. The problem really is that second game, we've only had the 2 games sample size in that second game. AXIZ kind of put them to the sword a little bit in those mid-game team fights.
Yeah, they did. And I'll be honest, let's be real, Dasher got beat in the mid lane 1v1 by a LJL Scouting Grounds rookie. Like the presence that Megumin offered on this set was significantly more pressure in a lot of team fights, in objective control, in rotation. He was just normally a step ahead. Now, we can argue till the cows come home that it's probably actually more Hoglet doing all of this, and Megumin's just kind of getting some of the gifts from Hoglet's work. Because, let's be real, Hoglet definitely put Tussle to the sword and then stepped on the sword, broke the sword in half, and then started slapping Tussle around with it. And Megumin just kind of benefited from that. I don't know what you guys think about that.
There's obviously a lot about this matchup. I know we're talking about that later. I won't go into it. But I do think that, like, it's one of those things where, like, if one bad trade happens, you have to spend, like, your next 2 waves, 3 waves, even it depends when they actually get to force you off your reset, playing like a bitch. You don't get to play that matchup, right? Because
ladies and gentlemen out there, if you're just wondering, it's Zed versus Yone. There's a viewer question a bit later. That's why we're holding off.
And that's the kind of thing where, like, I've been playing Zed for like 6 years now. And don't get me wrong, I'm an Ari main, but Zed is my second most played champion. I've definitely put my time in on that one too. And sometimes you just sat there and, like, it's actually more impactful that you don't get the kill, you just hold them in lane at like half HP than anything else. And there's a lot to be said about that, and I think that the problem for me is how the Hawks didn't work around relieving that or finding a game state. Because, like, one of my favorite things about Blank, for instance, last year was he's really good at just turning up to help his laners reset. I don't really think that that happened in this game from Tussle.
Tussle never did it. I'm sorry, he never did.
Yeah,
Hoglet always knew when he was going to, and then slapped him.
Yeah, what I will say is that I know both me and MaskedSwan in this game were kind of where Megumin, at least early in that lane, the first 10 minutes, landed barely any shurikens, and Dasher was doing fine and pushed Megumin
matter. One state
a long
lane,
way.
Doesn't matter. Just happened to happen once. If it happens when you get back to lane, you get one good trade. That's it. Yeah. Because, like, you can have if you both reset and you're both looking for a cannon wave, like, you're sat there and, like, okay, if I get one electrocute, double shuriken trade
Let's not go too deep into this.
Exactly. But it was like, it was one of those things where not a lot happened in the early game, and then comes to mid game, he picks up a couple things at the end of fights, and things start looking quite different. Especially because we actually, for a while, Hawks ended up with about a 4K advantage, and then they lose a Baron fight, and things really fall down. And there's definitely some issues here, especially with what I guess what happens is, what happens if there's a big disconnect between, say, particularly Apperman and Tussle in this game weren't really in the right space at the right time. Apperman was late to a number of fights.
Inon was actually on it on those TV.
Yeah, exactly. He was, and there was a few times when Apperman was like throwing a cannon barrage and then walked Sweat River, and therefore was late to a fight. So it was a 5v4, and everyone was dead by that point. And there's like
Apperman things.
And like Tussle's going in to look for big lilting lullabies and doesn't quite find it. Was getting engaged on. Is like, well, now I'm kind of in trouble because I have no way to get out. And we're in a 4v5 to begin with. So I still need to see a bit of synergy, more synergy from this Hawk squad.
Okay, so the Hawks, we're all on the same page. I'm glad that I'm not alone on that one, because I was well and truly that. And actually, this takes us onto our final team of Burning Core, gentlemen. I'm actually in a very similar boat with Burning Core. The only difference is, I feel like when Burning Core, similar to, as we've already mentioned, when they faced off against Crest Gaming Act, at least they just were like, oh, we have the advantage, we'll just end the game and win this. And it seems like the addition of Gadiadu is already starting to have some effects on this Burning Core lineup. And the fact that, honestly, Burning Core were able to stall a game out versus the Hawks for so long. Granted, the Hawks had the advantage. They should have ended that one a lot earlier. They didn't. They grinded the game out, prevented Burning Core gaining an advantage. And that's where credit is credit due to the Hawks. However, the fact that Burning Core then said, let's grind this out for another 15 minutes that it doesn't need to do, shows some promise for them. I'm a bit higher on Burning Core than I am on the Hawks, which is a difference than I think my predictions or my power rankings were.
So there's a little bit of a difference here for me in terms of like who I thought would be doing well and who wouldn't. Gadiadu in that first game versus the Hawks suffered in lane, man. Like Dash's Victor was like completely taking it to him. And, I mean, like, obviously, again, mid-lane matchups and stuff like this is Victor versus Orianna, and Dash was on the Victor, and was just like, Orianna, or rather Gadiadu in that game, like, really, really struggled to hold the lane where he wanted it to, and he was constantly trying to, like, shockwave the wave once or twice, or, like, try and, like, walk up and try and wave clear, and was just immediately killed, because, like, he'd walk up to lane, and then he'd just die because the jungler was there, and that is... And don't get me wrong, I do think that it was very good of the Hawks and Tussle to like actually like run in and be like, yo, I'm here to punish you from having the lane in a bad state. But it was definitely a lot of Gadiadu like not playing respectfully. I think that his second game was much better. I think he did a really good job of soaking that pressure. On the other side of things, I think Yuhi had two actually really good games. So I think that Gadiadu did worse maybe than I thought I would do, particularly in that first game. Second game was good, like I said. But Yuhi, I think, actually did pretty good, and that's not the person we thought would normally be doing good. So
yeah, I think also to that point, I think the first game there was less of an obvious play pattern, whereas in the second game you clearly saw they drafted very obvious things to do. So first game they kind of got Nara in the top side, then they got this Olaf, Orianna, Xayah, and Gragas, which is kind of a fine team fighting comp with a Nara as a sort of one part of the 1-4. But like the early game it's a bit difficult to know exactly what your plan is for the first 10-15 minutes until you can fight around those objectives, I guess. Whereas for their other game, the game versus Crest Gaming Act, you know, they'd gone with Orianna mid, nice and stable, can roam where you need to, can run the teleport, that's cool. Then they basically went Renekton Taliyah and Aphelios Thresh. That is two lanes with so much point and click CC, or just CC in general, to set up once to get rolling on the Taliyah. Decided to leave Renekton as a weak side and focus in on the bot, and by days did they make it work. They really abused Milan and Alchemy in that game. Once turns up, throws a seismic shove they didn't even need to do because he was already dead before the seismic shove
didn't even get
used.
kill participation. No.
Yeah, I know. But exactly. And then, of course, from there, actually, they played out much better because they kind of had an initial first 10 minutes plan as well as what they wanted to do in the mid game with, you know, Taliyah, Orianna, and the rest of it as well. And that game looked a lot better as a result. Yeah, Cassin kind of came back into it a little bit later with some nice shove back plays with the Crescent Guard and stuff. It wasn't enough, and I think mostly I liked what I've seen from Burning Core. When they've kind of got a little bit more of a game plan for the first 10 minutes. When they don't, or once kind of doesn't get to do much, I still think they've got some problems.
I think Burning Core could definitely be the team that, if they keep on the trajectory that they're currently on, which at the moment is stalling games out when they lose it and winning the games out with a very fast pace compared to everybody else. 26-45.
Rapid.
I think they basically it's like they've succeeded in the two games we've seen them on like both sides of the choke out, right? I mean, I say succeeded,
and they keep going. Game. Is what we're asking.
Yeah.
And I go for it.
I mean, I think basically my answer to that question is I hope so. I think, yes, I think they've got the talent there. I need to see Yuhi continue to improve. Actually, his two games this week were good, actually. The Xayah game wasn't bad. Really wasn't. There was one or 2 points when, like, the feather storms were the wrong direction, which was a little bit like...
Well, there was one where it was just, like, it's like, I mean, people, like, ripped on Uzi for that at One World, and it's like, it's more important that you're it's more important you're untargetable than it is to get the feathers in the right direction, because you're not looking to fight past that point anyway. That's microing, really. Don't get me wrong, like, it looks better if it's towards the enemy, right? But sometimes, like, okay,
exactly.
You're alive, cool.
And there was some nice, like, Gale Force orders to chunk out Dash, I mean, I just need to see him a little bit more, like, composed in the... when he's being aggressed on sometimes. Like, he had Zenit jump on him a couple times, and he kind of lost those 1v1s with, like, not getting... with, like, when he's the one being jumped on, and that's sometimes the problem with AD carries in
We
general.
will get to see.
and we'd see some
We
more
will
of it.
get to see that next week because he's against
Yeah.
Rascal Jester
Ooh, yeah.
and V3. So
Oh, yeah.
I guarantee you, Soul
Yes.
is going to make him
They're
work
going
for
in.
it.
Solid
that's-
secret, my days.
And that's an exciting thing to say, because if Nymaera, you can just take it over to the standings for us. That's something that's going to be important because we've got just 6 of our 8 teams are in that 1-on-1 bracket. It's going to be really important for us to be able to know that. But if I may take us on a brief tangent very quickly, over on our Discord channel, we are currently doing predictions with members of our community. And currently, we are going to go just very briefly over what the 3 of us put for each of the matches when we predicted it. Just so a shout out to anyone out there that also has extremely strong performances. We're waiting for the perfect game, the perfect prediction to happen. It probably won't come from us, just mathematically. But who knows? We could. For game 1, we all predicted DFM versus V3. I feel like we're both the DFM games, the Rascal Jester one as well. We were all very comfortable, and of course we got them correct.
Yeah, easy as. DFM looked good.
But then we all got the Sengoku games wrong.
Yep.
Which was probably the biggest surprise outside of maybe the last game of the day, which was also the Hawks versus AXIZ, right?
Teams aren't meant to come into a split being good at macro and the team which is meant to be solo queue talent coming in individually meh. That's not how it's meant to happen.
Yeah,
in my
I
head.
know.
I'm sad. I'm Sengoku. If they're gonna win games, they'll be at the start of the split. That'll be fun, right? But Hawks in spring. That'll be it, right? No, actually, the teams they faced actually look macro really good, and they were punished accordingly. So, yeah, good job, Sengoku. You lost.
Well, you and me, Alex, we did get the first Hawks game correct. We predicted that they would beat Burning Core, but Initialize, you didn't. You went with your heart for Burning Core, I think.
I did. Well, I did, and I just genuinely think that Burning Core have got quite a good roster at the minute. I really rate that Gary Arrow pickup. It was actually a very competitive game. Just the Hawks came out on top, and Zenit had a great game.
And sadly, oh, absolutely, as did Dasha. But sadly for you, Nymaera, me and Initialize were correct about V3 toppling down Sengoku. What happened with that?
Teams aren't meant to be good at macro coming into a split. And teams
Is he
which are
recorded
meant to be
this?
solo
I
queue
heard this a
talent
moment
and
ago.
be individual talent superstars are meant to come into the start of the split looking better because they can just balls the wall, go aggressive.
We got an
Sengoku,
F5 key for Nymaera because I think we've got him on
Yeah.
Oh,
It's sort of a bit of a loop. All right.
I'm just sat there. I feel like it feels like the antithesis of where these teams and the styles which I thought they'd play should come into a split. I thought that V3 would trend upwards and Sengoku would be pretty high and then not trend as high upwards or maybe trend down. But they've started pretty low and they're gonna have to start up in that trend because that was pretty crap. So nice.
Yeah, it was not good. It was pretty bad. To the listeners out there that might have figured it out, I am currently leading out of the 3 of us, which is the most important thing. I have 18 points currently, and the other 2 have 15 because they tried to hedge their bets and they didn't go with their brain. And TSD Stardust from the VCS Discord joined us and also is with me. He predicted AXIZ to actually overthrow the Hawks, and that's how he was able to get in at the very end. Congratulations to him. Bashumi as well, Bam Sushi actually, probably would have gotten 18 points, maybe even 21 points, but they sadly missed out on 2 of the games. But we got their other predictions in nonetheless. If anybody out there is interested in joining the predictions, you can still join us. You will just be a week behind everybody, and you can know where you would probably have sitted in the standings. Just go ahead and join our Discord server and go to the predictions part. Gentlemen, we must though very quickly go on to question time, and I'm waiting for that sting. I'm waiting for that stinger Initialize when we can have a question time one.
Yes.
We've got a fair few questions here from our lovely Discord community out there, so we're going to be spending a little bit more on time on this. We will try and go through it as quick as possible. Kozov PBE asks the first question coming into this. Going into Spring Split, who are your top 3 players in each role?
Come on,
Do you expect any of the top 3 lists to change at the end of the split. So he's asking us, who do we predict is going to be in our top 3, or do we expect any of the top 3 to experience any changes? So if you haven't got a top 3 right now, maybe think of any players that you rated a lot lower.
Yeah, this is going to be a bit slapdash top 3.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go quickly then, because I think I've got one I can do off the top of my head fairly quickly. So I think Ebby, Rayfaki, obviously the top 2, and then it's kind of a competition for third. At the minute, I am going to put in Cog. That said, I think there will be stiff competition from the likes of Nap, Apperman, and actually I think Ino has had a decent early showing and could become a worthy contender there. Jungle, sorry, go on.
Well, I think the thing for my top lane is that I wouldn't have put Cog in my top 3 coming into the split first week. Yeah, sure. I would have put like Nap as third, and I don't know if he'll make it there. So yeah, that's where I think a lot of my discrepancies will come.
I probably would have gone with Apperman just because of his summer stat performance was just unreal.
I think
like it
just because of
even
like the
matched by
Ornn
Eddie.
performances of Nap, I was just like, okay, sure, why not? Chuck him in as third.
Yeah.
On first thoughts
fair.
anyway.
But yeah, I think Cog, if we were seeing anyone split, that'd be a fair one.
I think jungle's a little easier. I think that'll be Steel, Once, and Muujin. I think are probably our best junglers in some order.
But wouldn't you have put Crash in at your original top 3?
No,
though?
I think I would have had Muujin because I think Crash would have been too inconsistent. I think you would have games where he was up there, but I think his inconsistencies. If Crash comes consistent, he could be up there. I think Hatchamecha as well has looked really good early on. Hoglet maybe an option shout as well.
I mean, if Hoglet plays like he did in the first week for the entire display, yeah, he's up there for a shout. Yeah, I think actually Tussle probably had the weakest performance out of any of the junglers, and that's not something I expected.
And he had a good first game too. Like his initial Lilia game was a good Lilia game.
Well, no, I'd say Crash was the worst performing jungler for me.
Maybe. Okay, but I think Crash still had some good moments. And I was like, oh, his Graves first gank, his first gank is Graves versus Vito. I'm like, okay, sure, really good gank, whatever. So I think like jungle could be all over the shop.
There's no bad jungler.
Loads of inconsistent junglers say.
Yeah, there's no bad jungler here either. I think, which is interesting to say.
So then we have to go over to the mid lane, which obviously has Arya. Yeah. But then who else? I mean, I would have maybe put Megumin in my top 3, in my personal
really
top 3.
Interesting.
This guy is like I'm as high. I'm buying as much Megumin stock as I used to buy Honey stock. So take that as you will.
I think I would have put Arya, Dasha, and then
Gadiadu for me.
Gadiadu.
Yeah. That's fair.
I think that Gadiadu is going to fall out of that top 3. Based on this first week, I think, actually. I think that Dasha can be contended, too, with a couple of good performances, but Arya is probably going to be best again.
Yes.
Probably.
I mean, I'd be surprised if it's not Arya.
Yeah.
Looking around at other mids that could be good, I think actually Ace, that second game in particular, looked good. The Jace pick wasn't a meme for once. Ramane has got a lot to prove, but we've known he's been there before. Megumin, I know you've got a lot of faith in that guy. I always think Nation. I think Nation actually was pretty good.
Sure, but I think the problem with Nation is going to be really hard to judge that because CGA look like a team that needs to figure out a lot of issues. Before it can shine. But I think they've won kind of fighting through issues rather than actually consistent game plans.
Lads, let's just go straight to the bot lane and think Utapon right has to be in all our top 3s, and then. Where do we go? Do we go with Soul if you were high on them? I would obviously keep my honey stock going because I brought in already. I can't sell now.
Yeah.
Definitely Utapon. Everything outside of that is like... I wouldn't have put Yuhu and Milan.
That's fair. Yeah, I think that's correct.
So I guess it's... I'm not sure... Well, I think maybe I'd go like...
No.
I don't know.
Hollow?
I think
Hollow and Gango, maybe?
Ooh, I'm not even sure about Gango. I think he had a really weird...
His summer was pretty... good though.
Yeah, no, true. I mean, like, okay, so after week 1,
I'm talking about this coming into spring.
Coming into spring.
We got our top 3 coming into spring, and then maybe we're talking about if we'd switch it around just off of our week 1 performance
and what we can think on trajectories and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think coming in, I think I would have had Utapon,
obviously,
probably Gango, and then I might have gone for a shout out to Zenit because I quite liked what I saw from him before in the LCK.
That's fair.
Though I could have seen an argument for someone like Hollow or Honey.
I would have said Hollow and Gango, and I think that Gango can fall out. Utapon's probably going to be... Utapon has been... He was the only, like, consistently good performing member of DFM Summer who really struggled. Again, and they look great at the end of it, but they struggled in early spring.
It took a while to get there. Yeah. They pulled it.
So, like, I think, like... Do we think that... Honestly, I think every one of these roles so far, I'm like, can these roles change the top 3? Absolutely. Yeah, maybe the top 1 is safe. maybe top 2 in something like, I don't know, top lane, if you think that Ray Falk is going to turn up again. But, like, I don't know, man. A lot of changes.
Yeah, I think...
Obviously, lads, I'm sorry, I have to just get us going. Initialized supports. I mean,
Reiner.
in my head, it's got to be Reiner, Proud, and then on the assumption that Gang's playing, Gang. But if he's not playing, then I'm probably putting Corporal instead.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Proud, Reiner, Corporal, without Gang around.
But I think...
But then NT's always been a top 3, so then not putting him there is a mistake, technically.
I don't know if NT is, like, the kind of individual performer I'd put up as a top 3 support. I don't know if it's, like, important for his shot calling and stuff like that, but NT's not a player which I'd
He's got a weird champion pool which can be helpful. Like, he's willing to pull out things like Rumble, right? It's always a nice touch.
Yeah, so, I mean, do I think Kazi is going to look top 3?
Mid-tier.
He'd probably be mid-tier. So I think you're probably looking at Reiner, Proud, Corporal, and I think that those 3 are pretty solid in top. I think unless, like you said, Gang starts coming in, then we start considering that.
Yeah.
But those 3, I think this supports the one role I'm like, well, I mean, maybe Secret props in there. Maybe Secret goes in there.
Maybe Secret. Because, I mean, actually, this is similar with, like, the bot lane. Actually, I think people like Sol, Zenit, Hollow, or Yuhi even after that first week.
Yeah, AD carry is wide open.
Like, all of these guys there were some people who really popped off from AD carry. Who I didn't expect to, actually, frankly. Honey's 2 games, the stats he puts up were nuts.
Good mileage out of that question.
There's a lot there we unpacked, and this could be a whole topic in and of itself. Thank you very much to Korskov PBE for that question. We're going to have to go straight over to Ishiki. Hello, Ishiki. Hello.
Hello.
He asks us, are there any surprises from this week's? And I would say the obvious one is, even though we didn't really expect much of a difference outside of our predictions, Sengoku going 0-2. Like, this team crashing and burning for me was the biggest surprise.
I mean, Rascal Jester for me.
Rascal Jesters. AXIZ look decent. What? Like, no one looks entirely bad.
No.
So, Ichishiki, in short, yes.
Sengoku, in my eyes, look bad.
There's so many surprises. Like,
I think, and then even then, like, Sengoku probably, well, they went 0-2. They look like the worst team consistently. Because at least the teams which look like shaky, at least they had one good game. Sengoku had, like, 2 meh games. I think there's stuff to build on there. I don't think it's, like, completely pants, but, like, yeah. You okay there, Sam? Have you attacked your mic?
I did. Sorry, Mike. Don't do that. I didn't mean it. Don't leave me.
Yeah, so in short, Shiki, yes, we're surprised. Not across the board, but like 2 or 3 teams out of 8. That's still quite a lot.
That is pretty good. Manska, hello Manska, who's super active over on our Discord. We've had many conversations with them. Asks us, for each team, which player do we think played the best this week? I'm going to obviously go with A for AXIZ and right in the mid lane, M for Megumin.
Interesting.
In my eyes, I'm sorry, I've brought stock and I can't sell it. So I've just got to keep hyping this guy up in every single time we see them.
I think I go Hoglet.
I'm going Honey.
Okay, all right.
There we go. We're all different on them. Yeah. We're impressed with AXIZ. I think that's safe to say.
Burning Core, I think. Burning Core, I think. Yuhi, actually. I think it's actually Yuhi.
Interestingly, yes.
Because like in the slow death they had in that first game, Yuhi was like his eye was like
holding on. Yeah. I think that's fair, actually.
Yeah. So okay, guys, quick thing. I'm going to take us on a 2-second tangent. Do we have to apologize to Yuhi if he actually has a great spring split?
We will do. Okay, we'll have an apology segment. If we think Yuhi at the end of the regular split,
we'll clip it and then post it at him. He'll have no context, and we're just saying we're sorry.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay.
Let me find.
We asked him to step up.
Music. What have I got on here?
We did. All right. Cool. Now going over, I'm gonna literally wrap us over to Crest Gaming Act. Who do we think performed best from that team? I'm not sure.
Cassin, maybe?
I wonder whether Nation, his Lucian game was really critical, though Cassin's probably a good shout as well.
I liked how Cassin played the Jinzhou in terms of like denying some of the early Renekton to Lyra, even if it wasn't like killing people.
That's fair.
But was that even the pick really in a lot of spots? Because I've been and ahhing. I actually think that was just not the pick there. I don't think it matters in a lot of spots.
I don't think it matters what the
game went.
Yeah, like I said, I think Mugen did the same thing on Nidalee, right? You can kind of do it with whatever. I still think it's Cassin. For me, I think they had a pretty decent debut.
Yeah.
Okay. And like I also think that the rest of the team. Well, maybe it's Yeah,
you can both have half of my opinion on that one, because honestly, Crest Gaming Act, if I could abstain, I would abstain.
I agree. It's kind of hard to tell. It's definitely not Milan, put it that way.
Sadly, I can't
Milan
even do
struggled.
that, and you know I would buy LJL Scouting Ground stock, and I can't. Coming over to Detonation Focus Me, lads. Who's the best?
I think this is an easy one actually. I think it's Steel. I think
Yeah,
Steel's
I
second game
I
was
agree with you.
yeah, because Steel that second game was actually relatively even.
I think
Aside
it
from
goes- I
Steel got super fed and he did a
I
really
think
good
it
job.
goes Steel, Aria, Utapon, Ebi, Utapon, and then Kazu and Ebi and like joint last for being a bit weird, but like they were
Yeah.
still fine.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I think it's that.
And I think if Kazu and Ebi were on other teams, they probably could have been standout performers.
For sure.
So
I agree.
Middling. Yeah.
Check
yeah,
any of them on CJ probably did best there. Yeah.
probably, yeah. Which is kind of crazy when you say Kazu could be doing that on other teams.
Yes.
Anyway, next team, rapidly going through this. SoftBank Hawks, gentlemen. I'm gonna actually go with. Actually, I don't know.
Dasher.
Convince me.
Dasher.
Dasher.
I think
The Victor game was nuts, and then
the
he had
Victor
his
was like a solo carry almost.
Yeah, and then-
Zen
and then
took
the
over a bit, but
and then his Yone was the one thing that was keeping them in the game eventually versus the Jesters.
bear in mind I
Like,
didn't really catch much of that second game. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I
Okay.
mean, like he got some nuts team fight double kills and stuff like this. The mechanics.
only
of
had
He
it
was
four
were
kills,
keeping
so
them a
just the
lot
two.
in that
Yeah.
game. I will
Yeah,
admit.
like
Yeah,
he
okay.
did some really good
Dasher.
stuff in that one.
I think
Dasher, now with a capital R at the end of his name, gentlemen. Remember, if you ever type that, that's what you have
Ah.
to do now. He
Nice.
changed it this coming into this
Got
split.
convinced
I need to
this.
update. Actually, I need to no. I was talking about this. I was saying this to myself. I need to update his
realize he'd
Leaguepedia
done that.
page.
Okay.
Yes, he changed it between 2 seasons. Rascal Jester. I'm gonna go with Soul.
Sol.
Yes, because Recap had one good game and then one meh game. I think Sol.
Yeah, that was it for me. Yeah.
I think it would have been Recap if you take that first game,
Yeah.
but it's Sol.
Yeah.
Two.
Yeah.
I think Secret can get an honorable mention as
I
well.
agree. I agree. Yeah. That's fine
I
by
mean,
me.
his first game versus DFM was a little bit like, buddy, I know you're going in, you're enjoying this, but that's a few ints in a row now.
Yeah,
At least he's not scared to go in versus
Right,
a
he was
team
play-
like
he was
DFM.
playmaking.
Like,
Exactly.
at least it showed something from them. Cool. Sengoku Gaming, gentlemen. I'm gonna go with Crash. No, I'm not. I don't actually think anybody should get an award from Sengoku.
Yeah, it's Crash or Gango.
Right? I think I'd give it more to Gango, honestly.
Probably
It's-
Gango.
Let me
I
let
don't
me
know,
have a
I
look at the
didn't see as
scoreboard. This
much
one I
of
actually
these
need to bring up the scoreboards for again.
Gango's
because,
two
like,
Samira games were fine. Like he was fine, but then Crash's Talia actually kept them in the game for a period of
that's
time.
true.
But then
Good players
Gango
game.
didn't just run it down versus the Jesters. Oh, but then NT did that for him, so it didn't matter. Oh,
It's kind of hard to tell. I think I'm gonna go with.
I'm going Gango.
Gango. I
I
think.
think I'm Gango.
It's kind of hard to. It's hard luck on Crash because he played against Mugen on that, and like we said, that kind of tore
True.
up the Renekton into Lear. But I'm also there like, you're playing Renekton into Lear, you can't lose topside 2v2 like that.
Can't,
And they
can't be
did.
doing that. V3 Esports, gentlemen. I actually think this is similar to Detonation Focus Me, where there is at least an honorable mention for everyone that doesn't get picked here.
Yeah,
that's a
I
good point.
personally want to hear from Initia1ise first for this one.
I think I give it to Mugen because his actual game versus DFM was actually pretty good, especially in terms of some of the defensive Nidalee play, and getting Cog ahead was really good. And then he actually had a really good game in the win as well, like his
Yeah,
second
that's
Nidalee
fair.
game as well. Whereas people like
fair.
Ace, like the Renekton game was middling to air.
Yeah, but
The Jace game was great. Yeah,
let's go
so I
Nymaera.
think probably Mugen for me.
Yeah, okay, Mugen.
It
okay,
is
Nymaera.
Mugen for me. But actually, Cog played really well. So
So that's my shout too. Yeah.
And I'm actually going to agree with you both, but I want to shout out Hollow on this one because
Yeah,
I
no, I
actually
agree.
think
I agree.
coming in
Good
completely
Debbie,
blind
good
into
Debbie.
this region, didn't have a bad performance. It wasn't great, but his bad performance was going 5-5-3 versus Utapon Kazu. So
Oh,
I'm
boo-hoo. Yeah.
pretty happy about that. Okay, good question. Good question. We need to go on to our last. Oh no, God, second to last question. We've got a long one for this
Do
one.
we want to save one?
No. We've got J Sick Beast. This is the man that actually created our prediction
buddy. Good
spreadsheet
work.
where you can go over it. He is shouted out at the front of the document, and you can also reach him on
Cheers to
Discord
you.
if you have any questions around that. Thank you very much over to him. He helped me hugely with basically he did all the work and I just kind of helped and told him the teams and stuff. He asked us first, why Z? So I'm going to now steal the show for a very brief second.
You
gentlemen.
answer these ones. You know all about this.
So, coming into the LJL scouting grounds, Megumin had played more Z than anything else on his main account, which you can also find over on my LJL scouting grounds document, which details every game that we saw on stream. He was part of Team Demacia, Megumin was, and their on-screen record was actually pretty poor. They only won 3 games and lost 4 games. He, however, did play 2 games of Z and 1 game on Yone. His first game of Z, because it had been banned for the first 4 days consistently, I'm pretty sure the coaching staff in the background, which were there for all of the games, said, hey guys, can you just like stop banning his Z? We want to see how good it is. First game out there, he gets 12, 2, and 6 and hard carries Team Demacia to the victory. It does help that his other teammates did very well, but he basically started everybody's lanes going. The second time he played it was on the next day of day 5, and he goes 4, 1, and 7, got a double kill in this game and absolutely ran over the team of Zon. Zon sadly didn't have anyone that actually got picked up, but I would like to shout out Keanu Peanuts because he was a great jungler and he was someone I was really hoping to see coming in to the LJL. Day 6 is also worth shouting out because this is where Megumin pulled out the Yone and he went 6, 1, and 7 with a really strong performance. However, he wasn't the only carry, as Mutton on Elise and Tell on the Ezreal had bonkers performances of their own. Megumin coming into this, he was known as a Z one-trick player. When we saw this being locked in, I basically freaked out for a split second. You can go and watch the broadcast because I was so happy I was casting this game because it felt like it was meant to be, and all the hours of watching Scouting Grounds paid off. I was like, cool, this is great. He's a Z player, and he showed why people need to ban this Z against him, because in the current meta, he can get away with doing this.
I think you can only do it in a couple of team comps and matchups, though. This is one of them, partly because, I mean, let's go look back at the scoreboard. I just want to see what was like on there against, I think it was GP and Lilia, right?
Yeah.
So you have GP, Lilia, Samira, and Yone. So there is one, like, immediate direct hard CC, and that's from the Alistar. So if you go top side, there's, like, nothing that stops you from doing your full combo. Yone is not Yasuo. You don't have Wind Wall. You can't block shurikens. He farms melee. He's very telegraphed because he always goes back to his E. A lot of things you can play around with the ult in that way, because if he does pop back in shadow, you do have enough time to go click that ult and follow them back. And Yone normally takes teleport. If you take Zed into that matchup, it forces them to go exhaust. That's what happens this game. And then because Zed doesn't like taking teleport anyway, if you at least manage to take the teleport away from the other player who normally likes to play with that, it's I think, which I've said too many times on broadcast this week, if you split push without teleport, you're basically just Internet Explorer. You turn up late to everything and no one likes you. So you are kind of doing well in that 1v1. You're nullifying a lot of what Yone wants to do. And if you get one electrocute trade with your shadow, with your double shurikens, like, it doesn't matter what point in the game, you effectively stop the enemy laner from laning at that point, because particularly if they're melee, they can't farm. Yone needs to have his E to trade, but like if he trades and you have shurikens up, then he gets to hop over your dash, and he gets to hop over like your knock-up thing. There's a lot of things in this matchup which work out well for the Zen effectively. I mean, I could keep on going about it, but like there are ways to zone off the Yone from team fights, from different parts of the lane, and that means that you can always get the first roam if you play it right. And Megan is obviously very experienced at this champion, so obviously knows how to do that.
It's going to be important to make sure teams keep an eye on that, because if they don't draft comps, this could be something that AXIZ could do. And if Megumin's pool is as large as it was in Scouting Grounds, which played Azir, Lucian, Orianna, Zed twice, Yone, and Syndra. We've already seen the Syndra and the Zed. If his champion pool is as large as what he showcased in Scouting Grounds, where he basically only got 7 games on stream, he played 14, but we don't know the other 7 games. This could be a player who could play a lot, right, Initia1ise?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need to see a little bit more from him. His Syndra game was okay. And the Z game as well was quiet until it wasn't. And like, so there's more to be seen from this guy.
There's one thing
really
about the Z thing too. He built Serpent's Fang, and in that
he
game
did.
it was
a
really,
great choice.
really good, because it was
I called it out.
it was against Double Shield Bow, Aegis, Sterax, and like and also Bloodthirster as well on the Onyx. There's so many things that actually put a shield on there. You just go through that immediately.
I shouted you out and said you'd love the Serpent's Fang here because you'd love the shield cancelling. So you're welcome, buddy.
Also, I would have said I would have really loved a Prowler's Claw. Prowler's Claw Z is really fun, by the way. Anyway. That's enough on the matchup. There are plenty of matchup reasons. I don't think Z should be played much. But
nice,
this one was
a
okay.
good choice.
And it's good to know that he has got this in his back pocket. And he did it against, arguably, coming into this, using a previous question we had, versus Dasher, who was seen as maybe the second best mid, right? So good to know he can pull out. His second question over to us was, in the LJL predictions, this is the official predictions, only 1 out of the 8 predicted V3 to beat Sengoku, to 7 and 12 in the Discord predictions. So a lot, our community was a lot higher on V3 versus Sengoku. In the official broadcast, they were less high. I've posted the tweet in the document in case you're not there, and you can also check out their tweet in the show notes, ladies and gentlemen. But why do we think that, gentlemen? Why do we think that Sengoku were just so high on the official broadcast and we were actually far more lower on them?
Yes, so I think it's less that we're higher on V3 and more the broadcast, the official broadcast really rated Sengoku coming into this. The community thoughts on this squad were very, very high from a lot of people, and as a result, they kind of had Sengoku as second, maybe even first team to in the LJL the split. I think personally that was a little bit
we didn't think
generous.
That.
No, exactly. We had our issues with Sengoku Gaming. And potentially they've proven true thus far in the first week, but yes, that's probably more of it. There was more hype for Sengoku than V3. Not that they necessarily think V3 are bad, but more that yeah. I mean, and also that their first matches were against DFM and Sengoku, who in a lot of the official matchups minds was top 2 teams in the league.
Yeah, that's fair. Nymaera, any thoughts on this?
I mean, Sengoku had, like, probably the highest chance of any team to just, like, randomly fall apart, and they kind of did, right? Because there's so many of these players are very aggressive, but also just... I think, actually, these players may be the most inconsistent in their role across the league. Maybe Hoglet is worse than Jungle at his worst. But, like, okay, the point is they're very inconsistent, and I think that they did better than they actually the bottom end of what I think they could be were, and that's actually terrifying in its own right? Yeah. But I think on the other side, V3 when they went through their off season, at least managed to replace like jungle top with kind of like for like, right? Mugen's kind of like what Boogie did. Cog is kind of like what Paz did in terms of like Paz will just well in this case Cog was just kind of a bit of a role player, played the Gragas and kind of just did whatever. And it looks like Hollow is a decent carry pickup too, right? So V3 kind of like slotting into like those same old motions where Sengoku completely torn everything apart, put together something else, and it hasn't quite fit yet. So I think in the first couple of weeks, well, okay, maybe I shouldn't have voted them to go 2-0. Okay, maybe that's why. Okay, that's why I got them wrong. There you go.
See, I was already on this mindset. I was hedging my bets, and I got it right. This is why we do our predictions separately, lads. I don't want to give you the hot knowledge. I'm joking, of course. But yeah, no, I think that's super interesting that the three of us came to a very different conclusion, and we're not just decided that. Some of the English other analysts out there and some other people within our community were a lot higher on Sengoku, and that we saw that divide. It was basically an even split almost, somewhat only slightly favoring V3, and we can obviously chalk that partly up to the fact
that Sengoku might start strong, but like.
Yeah, but we can also chalk the fact that our community was slightly more biased to V3 only by 1 vote because they listened to our podcast, so that makes total sense. So they got our thoughts on it.
Yeah, we echo chamber and like any other community does. So
plus there's also an element of like for Sengoku, for like the LJL, Gango is actually got a bit of a star rating over in the LJL. Like when he first turned up in the LJL a couple of years ago, he was ridiculously good. Absolutely destroyed people, and even last year, like he had his really high moments. Just as CGA were a very inconsistent team. So there are some things like that where this guy has actually got a little bit of a star power to his name, and some of these guys coming in for V3, Mugen, he's over in the PCS and played well over there for Flash Wolves and stuff, but he's less of a known quantity perhaps. And Hollow is another rookie, right? And then obviously Archer turned out exceptionally well, but could you expect that to happen twice in a row? So I can understand the hesitance, and also Cog as well was on the Jesters who look pretty crap in summer.
I mean, I think we're all in agreement at this point in time. Cog might just be the strict upgrade over Paz.
He had a great first week.
Cog in spring was actually someone to really pay attention to. I remember this is the
He
guy
was
that,
one
like,
of the reasons that they had that mad scientist coin that you both coined.
He was the only person that was playing Cannon really in the league, and definitely the only person that would look good on it, let's be honest.
Oh,
he was playing
100%.
stuff like Kale, and I mean, I guess Dasher was playing that top lane, but like, I think the thing is, what I've seen now is that Cog can be the role player too, rather than just being like the weird off carry from this first week. And I think that Cog can really fit into this team. If it allows them to be very mutable in draft, I think this is very, very good for V3.
With that all said, gentlemen, we have got our final question coming in from Bam Sushi, who, as I already mentioned, is on our Discord and doing our prediction with us. Hello, over to you. They ask us, how do you feel about Scouting Ground rookies performing this week? Right, so I have given a
we'll give you this
list
one, Lexi.
for us all. I've also technically counted Ino and Nihom because they...
Nemo, yeah.
Nemo,
yeah.
thank
Nemo.
you, sorry.
Actually, it'd be Nemo. Is actually probably how it is. Actually.
Nemo
Yeah.
and
It's
Ino?
not Ni, it's Ne, so it'll be Nemo and Ino.
And-
So Ino is dog, effectively in Japanese.
Right, so...
Inu, not Ino.
Oh, sorry, Ino, probably is actually. Oh, Ino? Yes, I think actually you're probably right.
While you guys
Apologise.
figure that out, those two players I am giving us technical pass because they were part of 2019 Scouting Grounds, and they were also didn't play in any LJL events. At the highest they've played in both, I believe, is the Challenger Series before that got discontinued.
Yeah.
Please bring it back, Riot, or I will not get off this high horse, and this footstool will never go away. But the main three obviously are Megumin, Milan, and Kinatu. Megumin is actually performing up to my expectations currently.
Way above mine.
I was buying a lot of stock with him. I was as high as him on Honey, and honestly, I've been very impressed with their performance.
I think that actually mid lane was relatively good this week, and
yeah,
Megamin was kind of up and amongst that, right? I thought Megamin, much like Milan, who I've talked about, didn't really do great. I thought Megamin would struggle, did very well.
did
And
alright,
wait, what was
actually
the other
did.
one?
Kinatu, top lane.
Kinatu.
They kind of had it.
One
taken
good
to
game.
them, but-
I
Yeah.
think they had one really good game on Matt Gragas, right? They played a Gragas game and an Aatrox game. I think I'm remembering all of this correctly. I know he played an Aatrox. Oh no, it was a Gnar game. His Gnar game was great versus Sengoku Gaming. He beat Paz in the 1v1. So
I think he had a rough time playing weak side, but that's not a surprise in some ways.
Oh,
His
and then
game
like
versus DFM was tough.
God, I mean, playing versus Ebby is rough.
That's rough.
Yeah, like it was tough, and like Steel and Ebby punished him really hard. Like he thought he got away from a gank and Steel was still there, and then he dies. And it's like, oh, I'm crying out loud.
On
It's
the
also
other
Renekton to Leah. That's tough.
Yeah, on the
Welcome
other
to
side of things,
LJL.
yeah, I think on the other side of things, I think played well, right? They came in and like I know they were sub to Ebby and stuff, but they really
looked
played
good.
the part.
Here's a translation, by the way. It means like the shallow water around a reef. It's a very, very pretty Japanese
Whom is
name.
that?
Inno.
Ino. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Nemo, I mean, did pretty fine. They helped Honey do their thing, so that's good enough for me, right?
Yeah, and
One or two wins, but yeah, pretty good.
Milan honestly was my most concerned with, but I mean, we've kind of already
That team is
mentioned that the team itself is a problem, and his Ash game was basically what I had seen in Scouting Grounds. It was his Ash game is what I expected to come in from his Scouting Grounds performance. He didn't get his Jhin yet, which is definitely his best champion, by the way, from Scouting Grounds. So I expect more, but I don't know how much more I should ask, being realistic here.
like here's something for me. Do you think that these players did better than Pink, Nagi, and Natsume last summer, right? Because they were the
Yes.
other Scouting Grounds players that we saw. I would say that Milan still probably did better than all of them. I think that they had, like, Pink, for instance, had that one good Katarina game, but the rest of it was meh.
And that's
Nagi,
the thing about that comparison I think is actually very good is these are both their pocket champions. One was against DFM, one was against the Hawks. Now, but you could argue Dasher rather is a better mid laner than Syros in just a vacuum sense. And
Sure,
Megumin was able to keep up with Dasher and then eventually helped go through it. And obviously, as I already mentioned, partly through Hoglet. But hey, that's what you do. You play to your team, and yeah, I actually think you're right. I think I would rate Megumin above all of the previous rookies. But I don't know how I would really go with the rest of them. The rest of them I need a few more games from
I think
them.
Kanatu is probably similar level to Natsume, because we saw Natsume did okay on a couple of Renekton games. I think that maybe that he could do better. I think Natsume struggled quite a lot.
But then he also did play against Ebby and Paz, and it's like, what? Ebby, the man that always goes to World, Paz, the man that stopped Ebby from going to Worlds, and it's like, well, he beat one of them and lost to one of them.
True.
So
I agree. I think as a whole, this cohort of rookies coming in probably better than the last one we had, and they could make a dent actually, particularly in AXIZ. Like this team could go pretty far.
I'm excited for
I know we wanted to say that versus like the spring 2020, like the Princess role. These guys could go far. AXIZ are starting on a much stronger foot this time, so hopefully they don't like handicap themselves to that degree. But yeah, I think these rookies are all right actually.
Who have they got next week?
Well, AXIZ. The fact that AXIZ are basically playing 3 Scouting Grounds rookies, 2 from 2019 and 1 from 2020, and they're with Hogler and Honey. Quick thing, I have to just ask this to both of you because I've got my opinion on this. Honey and Hoglet now actually being the quote veterans is actually allowing them to make calls and decisions within the game, especially Hoglet now, right?
Particularly Hoglet.
Because of that, could we technically account some of the success of this week to those 2 players having a bit more control over what is said in the comms now? It's super up in the air hypothetical.
I think
it's an observation.
I mean, particularly for Hoglet, we know what he's like when he's got a plan. He is so much better when he gets to do something, particularly in that first 5 to 10 minute marks. If he doesn't, he genuinely gets a little bit lost in his pathing. His efficiency is very poor at that point. You know,
it's true.
That one game I keep referencing of him versus Once, where Once gets 4 levels and a Flame Horizon in the jungle. Should never happen.
And there was stuff like their second game in Summer versus DFM in 2020 where like they tried to go top lane. Honestly, they should have won that 2v2. DFM messed up. They had that set in Italy and then Earnyan failed a flash.
They got away with murder.
They got DFM got away with murder. I'm like,
I'm sure there was some outplays in there too.
And so, there are some outplays and misplays, but like Hoglet, like he looks so good up until like the question is whether he can like derail now and still recover, because that's where they've struggled before.
Exactly. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will round out this episode of the podcast. We've kept it, I think, honestly, pretty concise with a 1 hour and 25 minutes. I think that's actually pretty good.
Questions, not bad.
We did have to rattle through a lot of it, and we couldn't go as in-depth as we used to. But hey, ladies and gentlemen out there, you told us you wanted slightly shorter podcasts. You didn't want 2.5 hour slogs. So this is it. We benefit from your feedback, ladies and gentlemen out there. Now, before we go, I must say, myself, Initia1ise and Nymaera, we haven't just been doing LJL this month already. All of us have been doing a lot more projects, and I think this is an appropriate time for us to shout that out. Nymaera, would you like to go first?
Oh my freaking god, I've been so busy. I've cast 4 games of UKL in the first week because they put me on twice because they like me, and that's really cool. So I'm doing that again this week. I have some other things in the works. There's some stuff with Square One, which of course is very cool, and I know that you've got some stuff to talk about that too. I've been, like I said, I helped on Milky's bootleg broadcast the other day, and my uni's caught up as well. But yes, I basically, long story short, I have a lot of stuff going on in personal work stuff, also a lot of casting stuff. Casting stuff you can catch on my Twitter, @Nymaera is below there. Please check it out. It'd be really nice to get some recognition for the hard work I put in.
Sounds good. Initia1ise, what have you been doing in the background? You got some music as well to plug.
I do. I released a track called Virus Origins, which is a really cool piece. I helped do quite a lot on. I wrote the track, or at least a lot of the track is written by me. I sang on it, performed on it. Also, you know, I handed it over to producers to do a lot of different stuff with it. So they've really done some fantastic stuff with that track. So buying that off my Twitter page. Been doing a lot of casting as well over with UKEL alongside Nymaera, of course. I was on the desk and casting. I'll be casting again on Thursday, I believe, with Nymaera. We've got ourselves a really cool matchup between Demise Academy and London United. I've also been doing some work with Split Push, doing some stuff with Square One. Been writing a lot of articles, which of course you can find me at under my tag Initia1ise at jinxesports.tv, where you can see a lot of stuff around League of Legends and Genshin Impact particularly. That's most of my stuff. A few applications around and about. We'll see whether those turn up, but I don't want to throw my name out there before those come to fruition.
Absolutely not. And for myself, I have been doing a show over with a Milky Cereal, our guest commentator that came on. I'm doing the Electric Recap, which is a show all around the LEC. Episode 2 will be coming out by the time you listen to this podcast. And this week's guest was Initia1ise. So if you want to hear more of us two, I'm sure Nymaera will be coming on at some point.
We'll see. See how I can fit you into my busy schedule, apparently.
You can spare a bit of time for little
I
old me
bloody
and
hope so,
Milky.
dude. Bloody hope so. It's been a nightmare couple of weeks.
I've also got a few things in the works. I should hopefully have my esports show launching within the next 2 months, which will be very exciting.
I should hopefully have our thing launching at some point too.
Be very exciting. Outside of those things, I have been doing some casting with Square One as well. I've also, in theory, got more casting of other games such as Teamfight Tactics and Valorant. Should be on the horizon for me, as well as also, obviously, I'm going to be pushing my main spiel, which is hosting. So, hello, everybody. But obviously, things will have to wait and see. And my God, do I feel like a producer that we all have worked with multiple times with Patrick, where he tweeted out very recently that he is looking forward to working with people he's been working with for the past year, because we haven't actually got to do any in-person events for a full year. And what's weird for the three of us is we've only done this. This is what we know.
We met up like once or twice at the very start of it. But like, I mean, I know personally, I mean, obviously the LJL is a large part of this, but I've cast 350, 370 games maybe, like over the last year. And like, actually, we're just coming up to our year anniversary of starting being esports talent, right?
Yep.
Yes.
I have
met,
met 2 people I've worked with in esports. That's you two. That's it. I've only met you two that I've worked with in esports. Everyone else, completely on screen. And that's included doing stuff like the esports, the University Esports Masters, like the Pan-European University event. That's big stuff, right? I've met none of them. So I absolutely agree with that. Can't wait to actually meet people. Be great.
Huge time.
It's been a wild ride. I mean, I've only met one person I've worked with outside of you two, and that was because I happened to be an extra as a part of the Blast Premier tournament, where I happened to also meet Phil, who is a producer that I imagine we've all worked with once or twice before. So I'm like, I can technically be like, I have a photo with him, and that's the extent where I'm like, we helped fill in for some stuff. But, ladies and gentlemen, that's our own personal quick plugs, just to let you know we're doing this as well as also a bunch of other stuff, and it was made sense to promote it, as we've got a lot of fires in ovens and big casting opportunities for all of us. But with gentlemen, with that all said, thank you, everybody, for listening, watching, and everything. You can catch our live broadcast of the LJL this week. It will be on Sunday at 9 o'clock, where we will cover the final 5 games, which will be, gentlemen, Rascal Jester facing off against Burning Core, AXIZ facing off against Rascal Jester, V3 versus AXIZ, and then Burning Core versus V3. You'll be then able to catch our coverage from a blast from the past on Monday at 10 a.m. And that will start with Crest Gaming Act facing off against Sengoku Gaming, Sengoku versus the Hawks, and then to round us out, I think Nymaera is probably going to take these games, and it feels fair. For once, it'll be Detonation Focus Me facing off against Crest Gaming Act, and the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming facing off against Detonation Focus Me. Gentlemen, have you got anything you'd quickly like to say?
Roll on week 2.
Roll on week 2.
And with that, thank you so much for listening and or watching, and we'll see you all very, very soon.
Matinee.